Hello, good afternoon to everyone watching. Thank you for tuning in and being here. This is Solomon's Temple, where we get to talk about real issues concerning us and concerning the church. Once again, welcome back to Solomon's Temple. This is the platform where we get to look at issues and we then look and we ask ourselves the big question: where is God in an issue? So, be it political issue, social issue, marital issue, relationship issue, church issue, we look at the big question and we ask ourselves, where is God in the issue? So it's all about asking questions. It's all about having a conversation. It's not about condemnation. It's not about judging. It's about really trying to understand and get a biblical worldview to what we do. And this afternoon, I have the privilege of having Reverend June Major, who is an ordained priest with the Anglican Church. And she's been on a hunger strike in Cape Town, Bishop's Court to be precise, right? In front of the home of the Archbishop of the Anglican Church, and she's it's sort of a protest that she is embarking on. This is not the first time she's done that. She's done that about, I think, 4 years ago, where she's protesting abuse in the Anglican Church and even outside of the Anglican Church, where women have been abused, either raped, sexually abused, different forms. And I would like her to just, she would share with us and tell our story. Reverend, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me as well.
Yes. Now,
you want me to go ahead and share?
Yes, you are taking on a big institution like the Anglican Church. This is like a multi-billion-dollar business. When you look at today, this is a very powerful institution historically, politically very influential. They can, decide how a nation goes. In many cases, in many countries. But then you have a legit story that you feel, you can put your life on the line for that. Tell us about how actually this whole story, your rape issue, started.
Okay, so it goes back to 2002, where I was raped at the College of the Transfiguration, which is the seminary, the Anglican seminary in Grahamstown. I was told to keep quiet by Bishop to protect the name of the church. And like many other women, you're told to keep quiet to protect the family or protect an institution. I also felt that maybe it's best if I keep quiet to protect the name of the institution. But time goes by and it eats at you and it eats at you. I eventually reported it a few years back, and the docket disappeared a few times from the police station. And then I phoned and I phoned and I phoned, and eventually a police in Grahamstown. He used to be the previous bishop of Grahamstown. When that was said to me, I knew that my case is going absolutely nowhere.
Okay.
Sorry?
No, I'm saying, are we saying?
And the months went by, and eventually.
Yeah, are we saying the same Archbishop of the Anglican Church, the same Archbishop and the Anglican Church was also the bishop over there in Grahamstown? Is that what you're saying?
Of Grahamstown, yes.
Okay.
Before he became Archbishop, he was the Bishop of Grahamstown.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, after months and months and months, eventually they told me that the case is thrown out and no reason was given. But I knew that would happen. In 2016, 4 years ago, I embarked on my first hunger strike. On day 7, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba came out, and then my hunger strike was outside the office, the diocesan office of Bishop Garth Council. Archbishop Thabo came out on day 6, and he promised to deal with it. However, When he turned his back on me and walked away, that was the last I saw or heard from him. Nothing came of it. 4 years later, and in these 4 years, I suffered tremendously. I was homeless. I was physically on the street. I was in a shelter. I went hungry many times. People opened up their homes for me, took me in, etc. I would cook or clean to make up so that it covers my accommodation. I had to move to another province to just look for work where I was held up at gun. I wanted Archbishop Thabo Makgoba's residence in Bishop's Court. That's why I felt he would see me. He's got no other way but having to pass through that gate, and he has to pass me if he wants to go out. I needed him to see what I was going through. I needed him to know how I was suffering. And I started my hunger strike on the 1st of July. That was on Wednesday. Archbishop Thabo Makgoba came out the afternoon, late afternoon, early evening, on my very first day of my hunger strike, in front of many witnesses. And also passion, which is basically I wanted an internal investigation done with regards to my rape. He needs to call my rapist in and myself, sit us down and talk through it. I needed him to go to these churches where my rapist ministered at as well, because there are other victims too. And needed to find a safe space where the women there could feel safe enough to come forward because they were too afraid because of intimidation and bullying. I needed that, and Archbishop Thabo, it's not within his power. I must follow the legal route. I told him it is within his power. He's our Archbishop. I'm his clergy person as well as my rapist is. And he has got the power to do that. He refused, and in fact, it was quite a very cold response. He could hardly even look me in the eye. A lot of the people standing by started telling him that, he's being very callous and cold towards me. He's showing no compassion whatsoever. And in fact, you just see patriarchy all over.
Mm.
And he was very determined that he's not going to do anything about it. I made reference because last year, I don't know if you know that Uyenene was murdered at Claremont Post Office.
Yes,
And in
yes.
responding to her family, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba had said plea. And I said to him, well, I am a female in the midst of a femicide in South Africa, and I've been on the streets, and does that not pain him deeply as well? But
Mm.
unfortunately, he showed no compassion. It was
Mm.
no, and that was it. That was day one. Eventually, it went on. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna come back to Bishop
Then
Archbishop.
on Saturday,
Yeah. Sorry, the line is a
yeah,
bit slow. But before we even go to Saturday, what really happened? Back 20 years ago at the seminary in Grahamstown, when you were raped, some of the stuff that I read is you actually went to the police station, opened the case, and they said it wasn't actually a rape. Can you describe what happened between you
okay, yeah,
and your rapist, and the whole interpretation of the law that the police gave to it, and then your
okay.
realization later that actually that was a rape?
Okay, so I only reported the rape a few years back, and
Mm.
the police officer detective told me that because he did not ejaculate inside of me, it is not rape, but attempted rape. So the police docket says the charge is attempted rape. And for years, I believed that it is attempted rape because that's what the police officer had told me. And I did not know the law pertaining to this and what they use as deciding factor as to which charge needs to be brought. But
Mm.
after that, I think about 2016, 2017, I realized that rape is penetration for me. Whether you penetrate for a few seconds, whether you penetrate for a few hours, whether you penetrate for 1 second or 5 minutes or 20 hours, penetration equals rape to me. So as far as I'm concerned, he penetrated. I was able to fight him off, so he wasn't inside me long enough. But to me, it is rape. And so sadly, that is what is happening all around. The police go to you and tell you, listen, he did not ejaculate, so it is rape. It's not rape, it's only attempted rape. As far as I'm now concerned, penetration equals rape.
Exactly. Now when I was talking to my wife before this interview, I was today, she actually mentioned the same thing that you mentioned about Archbishop Makgoba, saying Archbishop Makgoba is always in the forefront of being vocal against gender-based violence. He was vocal against former President Jacob Zuma. He was vocal against the young lady from UCT, that you spoke about. He was vocal against what happened to her. But then this is one of your own that you trained in the seminary. This is one of your own that you were familiar with 20 years ago. You were in charge then, bishop of that area. And then now you are the archbishop, of the Anglican Church. And for him to come and give you this cold, conversation that he gave you, is that the usual experiences of many other women like you around the Anglican Church?
Unfortunately, yes, it is. But the women do not speak out, because if you do speak out, this is what happens to you. Your position is at risk. They alienate you, they push you out completely. In fact, one of the female priests that was there the one day with Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, after he had left, she spoke to everyone standing around and said for 5.5 years, they, as women clergy in the Anglican Church, has been trying to get a meeting with the Archbishop to address issues of gender-based violence and patriarchy and how they are being treated in the church, but he refused. 5.5 years, he's just refused to meet with his own female clergy. So how can you speak up against gender-based violence? How can he point fingers to government, or whether it was Zuma or whoever, when you are not being accountable within your own household, when his own house is not in order? So to me, you cannot point fingers and tell the government to get their house in order and call them to resign when your own house is not in order.
And you have a situation. How did you even, you're not with the Anglican Church currently. How did you leave the Anglican Church? Because it seems like you are now an exile, you're an outcast, or sort of. Because you are trained, you are an ordained priest of the Anglican Church. What happened? How did you get out of the circle?
Not really out of it, am I? I'm still an ordained Anglican priest. I'm a Christian. I worship in an Anglican church, or whichever church I find myself closest to. I'm still identified. I've not resigned as a priest in the Anglican church. I'm a priest without a church. That's what I call myself now.
Okay.
I cannot apply at any church in the Anglican church in South Africa or nation or worldwide for that matter, because they're withholding a certain paper. Without that paper, I cannot apply. So in fact, I'm still ordained, but I just don't have a church.
Yes, of course. Once ordained, you're going to be ordained. What paper are we talking about here?
It's called a letter of commendation, which goes from one bishop to the receiving bishop. So that is what it's called.
And is that because?
So to me,
is that because of your
so that is what happened.
campaign and your fight against gender-based
No,
violence?
no.
You cannot get that commendation from the authorities?
In all honesty, I think so. I think it's because I've broken the silence, because you must understand it's not only me. It's not only women that's been abused in the Anglican Church. There are boys that have also been sodomized by priests within the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. And it's been covered up for decades by bishops and archbishops. So it's just a whole lot of ugly sexual violence that's going on within the so-called body of Christ, the hierarchy of the Anglican Church.
Now, how has this affected your walk with God? You were seeing injustices right in front of your eye, but then you have faith in God, and then you now like, but God is a God of justice, and the Anglican Church represents God here in our communities. Why is there not justice if God is a God of justice? And how is that translated into affecting your faith, making your faith stronger or weaker, or questioning certain things and questioning God in certain ways?
My faith is the one thing that has gotten stronger. And I think if it was not for my faith, I would have not endured. I think we are all human. And as far as I'm concerned, when I look at these men who are doing these atrocities They are not men of God. They are not speaking on God's
mm,
behalf, because that
mm,
is not what God stands for. And I think, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Anglican tradition and Roman Catholic tradition. We have a service called Palm Sunday, which is the Sunday before Easter.
yeah.
Not sure if you're familiar with that, where we walk with
Yes.
our palm crosses and procession, etc. It's also called the triumphal entry, where Jesus enters Jerusalem and they're throwing the palms down. But it's also called Passion Sunday. And I think when we think of passion, we think of love, etc. But passion comes from the Latin word which means pasium, which means suffering, to suffer. And so that is the start of Jesus' week of suffering. And I think it's in that suffering of Christ where I find my strength, that he would walk that road of suffering to get to that Easter moment. And so I'm going through this walk of suffering now, but I do realize that it's not just for me, but there are so many other people out there, women and children and men, in fact, who is going through this road. And it's God's will, I believe, for me now to stand up and speak out and make a difference.
And you have to do a whole lot to consider, to take care of yourself. I consider you jobless. you know you don't have a job, so you need to be able to earn some money to take care of yourself, and like you said in earlier on, you had to live in shelters sometimes. How do you sustain yourself? I know there are well wishers, families or friends, and that are going to be supportive, but uh, how have you been keeping in that regard?
It's been extremely hard. It's been tough. It's been beyond tough. There were days I didn't have food. There were days I went completely hungry. And as a woman, you have to have certain essentials. There were times when I
Mm,
could not even afford sanitary towels, and as embarrassing as it is, I need to share the story. There were times where I literally had to pick up newspaper on the streets, go to a public toilet and wrap toilet paper in it and use that as a sanitary towel. It's been tough. There were some people that opened up their homes for me, and I thank them for that. There were others that helped and then talks about it afterwards. Right now, I'm staying in a place, somebody's house, but I will do the cooking and cleaning, so I don't want anything for nothing. But
mm,
I am looking for a job in a job hunt. I'm 51 years old, and they look for experience in a certain field, and my experience has been in the ministry and community work. So it's difficult finding a work whilst my age counts against me, or you're over experienced, and so it's tough getting a job. And it's just it stripped me of my self-worth and dignity. I just want to work where I can afford a place of my own to be able to sustain myself, and I don't think I'm asking too much.
mm, mm. What has been some of the voices coming from, especially the church, be it the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church or any of the church in South Africa? Some of the women that have been, I'm sure you've gotten some of them reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, we understand your pain. Uh, I've been through the same thing too." Have you been getting that sort of communication with other women who've been raped and abused?
Yes, I've received messages from other women, yes, who've been raped and abused, even from men. And the men who've messaged as well, it's harder for them to speak out publicly because they are men. But the women as well, it's difficult for them to come forward because it's their word against that of a clergy person. And if they look at what they've done to me, they've completely wiped me out, alienated me, isolated me, and it's difficult for someone to go through this. So they're not willing to take that chance and go public because what they made an example out of me, and you lose. It's a huge sacrifice, um, but it's because of them that I do it as well, because so many women have just been silenced, so many children have just been silenced, and so I will be their voice. And it's
Mm,
been at a huge personal sacrifice, but it has to be done.
yeah. And if you look at the Anglican Church in particular and the church generally, why is it in such a state where we tolerate this, where clergies or people in authority get away with abusing women? Why has it almost become very, very easy to do that? Where we even tell them, do not go to the police. Let's deal with it in house. We tell them, well, we use scriptures, to try to comfort them just so they don't make it public. Why has the church generally just become such a safe haven for such perpetrators?
Well, sadly, it's happened over the years. And if they must speak out now, and if they have to expose certain people now, some other skeletons will be coming out of the closet of people which they do not want to have exposed, unfortunately. And that is just reality. It goes high up within the ranks of the Anglican Church. So they don't want their names coming up. They don't want to be exposed. Some of them are married, some of them have very top positions, and they don't want these things coming out. So they keep quiet. You know, you cover up and you cover up to protect each other and to protect yourself.
Mm. And you have and you know your location now in Cape Town, where you are. You just describing where you are. You're outside. You're in Bishop's Court. You know, close to the residence of the Archbishop, if I'm correct.
Like, I'm not there now. My hunger strike, yes, was there,
Okay.
right outside his door. And on the Wednesday night, the first night, the Archbishop had called ADT, which is a security company, 3 times, and he called the police also on me that night, which I found very painful and hurtful because we had spoken the afternoon. He knows who I am. I'm one of his priests. And for him to call the police on me and a security company during the night to say I'm trespassing when I wasn't even on his property, but then again, he knows it was me. That really hurt me. It made me feel like he just treated me like I was
Oh,
just some
so,
common
so,
criminal,
so
and it's
the
okay just to call
Anglican
the police on
bishop,
me.
the Anglican bishops of South Africa called the security, you know, to come and get you out of your location. He have met you, you know, during the day, and he called the security that you were trespassing, and he's familiar with you. He's been familiar with
Yes,
you for
and
so many years.
yeah, yes, and he phoned the police as well. That was the Wednesday night, the very first night of my hunger strike. He phoned the police as well to have me removed. And when they all came there, I made it very clear that I'm not on these property. I'm outside the gates, which was on the pavement, which is municipal property. So I was not trespassing.
So the accusation that he put forward was you were trespassing.
Yes.
How did you, how do
Yeah.
you how do you how do you interpret that though from for leaders, you know, giving making those instructions to get you out of there? You're not a stranger. You're not a threat. You know, to
It
anybody's.
was
You're not a danger to anyone there.
It is extremely painful because at the end of the day, my perpetrator continues to minister. You know, he's in the comfort of his home ministering, and, you know, other women are there and they are at risk. But yet, my Archbishop does not even listen to my concerns, and instead, he calls the police on me. But yet, why does he not call the police on the perpetrator? So it really hurt me. It pained me deeply.
And you know, just before we bring an end to this interview, just for you, what do you hope to achieve at the end of the day? I know you had asked, you know, the Anglican Church that all you need is to create an internal investigation. Uh, and I'm actually shocked that the Anglican Church had never really investigated this issue, have they?
No. So they've agreed now, after my hunger strike of a week, that they will investigate and that they will also contact the prosecutor in Grahamstown to reopen the case. However, no timeline was given. So I have given them a timeline. I want it done by the 8th of August, which is a day before Women's Day. And also, what I've also realized is not just about me. There are other victims out there, not just within the church, but the system. You know, we get raped, we get abused, and then we
Yes.
get silenced, and the system abuse and rape us again, and the perpetrator walks free. So I do have an NPO, and I'm going to use that NPO to fight for justice for every woman and child who's been silenced and who's been denied justice.
Hmm. Hmm. And now that you've given them a timeline, at least you have, and for them to even agree to get in touch with the prosecutor and begin the process, this is a step forward for you, considering, you know, the last few years, isn't it?
It is a step forward, but then again, seeing is believing. He made promises 4 years back and nothing came of it. This time I have it in writing. The last time I just took his word for it because I trusted him as the Archbishop. Now I do have it in writing and I will hold him accountable. And I'm not stopping my fight.
Hmm.
not for
Mm,
me and not for others. I will not stop fighting.
mm. And just one last word from you. What do you have to say and to challenge people within the church and even outside of the church and community in our society generally, when it comes to abuse against women and children? Also, what do you have to say to those, to women who've been abused, to men who are not taking responsibility, who are not being protective of women?
Yeah. I like to say to the women, it's not your shame, it is his shame. And to society and our communities, we perpetuate it. Society and our communities allow it because we blame the victim. Look what she was wearing. What was she doing outside that time of night? She provoked him. She enticed him. She flirted. And the woman is always to blame. We need to start changing the narrative and saying it is the man who raped her and stop asking questions. I mean, when I went to the police station, I was asked what panties did I wear. It was at night, I was in bed, the door was closed, he had no right coming in. We need to change how we speak and we need to stop covering up for our fathers, our brothers, our sons, our children. And we need to say rape is wrong and the only one to blame for it is, in fact, the rapist. We need to break the silence. We need to speak up. We need to speak out. We need to challenge and we need to take back what was taken from us. But above all, know that you as victim are not to blame for it. It is the rapist. It's not your shame. It is their shame. And just to say that I hold space for you because you are not alone and never let suicide be an option. Always reach out. Try to break free. Do not stay with someone for the sake of what if, but break free and break that silence.
Mm. Thank you so much, Reverend. You've sacrificed a lot. You sacrifice your life. You sacrifice your job in so many different ways, and not just for your own sanity and for justice for yourself, but you've taken it a mile, ahead, and where it's about women and boys, like you said, and men also generally, but abuse in itself. So I really want to thank you, and we hope that the commitment from the Anglican Church would be executed, and we hope that some sort of justice and investigation that will be done, will bring some sort of justice to you. So thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And it's wonderful that a man is also at the forefront fighting past women. So thank you.
Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless. Thanks.
Bye.